Hey everybody, welcome to the Cheech and Manny Music Show. We got a great one today. It's going to be about grunge, and without talking about grunge, we're going to mention alternative too. And here's my co-host Manny. How are you, Manny?
Cheech, what is going on?
Not much. Feels like it's been a while, man.
Yes, sir. You know, it's funny. We had a great discussion at the temple on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And you and I through talking and texting, we kind of came up with this episode on grunge because I think you have a very controversial, legit opinion, which I appreciate, and you probably voice the opinion of a lot of people. Um,
Yeah,
but
from my metalhead generation.
Right, right. But before we begin with any discussion on music, shout outs.
Well, let's just say we actually wrote this show on me and Manny do a post Facebook sometime, and we just talk about how the show went, or just talk about life. And we wrote the grunge show. Remember, like was it
It
last week?
was amazing. It was
We wrote
amazing.
everything, and then you
Yeah.
sent me a full documentary, and we covered everything in the friggin' documentary, which is
It's
nuts.
crazy. No, what they did, we covered and explained. And I just couldn't believe like our knowledge
I
that we were
know.
kind of on point on so many things.
Well, my first shout out always Pottersfield BX.
Check them
Check
out.
YouTube, Instagram. We're on this thing. It's a Facebook channel called Independent Record Labels. They featured us, I think, last week. We got some things in the works. I think an artist may be sampling one of our music. Ironically, Bobby was telling me. So just giving my boys in Pottersfield BX a shout out. Check us out. And then from the temple, got to mention his Jacobo. And you got to get the gringo Jacobo, Jacobo, my man, our man. He got it, man. He got the Rush
That's
at
amazing.
19.
I'm surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm amazed. That's the
Yeah,
word.
Jacobo is a brilliant kid. 19 years old in college. He watched the Rush episode. He got it. He was asking me questions about Spirit of the Radio, with the words of the prophets, how they spell prophets. He loved that. And that's what we want. We want the young kids, like his generation, to listen to Rush, listen to the philosophy. We got Jacobo. Thank you. Hopefully, there's 1,000 more that we could get. And I love Jacobo. Yeah, nice shout out to you, brother. So well, so we're gonna talk about grunge. So would you want to start it? You want to talk?
Strap in, get ready.
This is
Before
an
we do
event.
though, wait, Cheech, before we do though, speaking of
Yeah,
Rush, just one
okay.
little
Oh,
blip on Rush. Don't hate
sorry,
us.
Devontae. Sorry, Devontae.
Dude, I was on my way back, I was listening to just 2 minutes on Rush. Hang with us.
The gift.
And I have to say, Cheech, dude, I was listening to the album Grace Under Pressure.
Oh,
Dude, for
love it.
some odd reason, I don't know if this album is underrated, but dude, After Image and Red Sector A, oh
Those
my
those
goodness, man.
they're not popular off that album.
How?
I don't know. The popular ones are Distant Early Warning and Enemy Within. They had
What
videos.
what
And
well that makes sense. I guess because they were they released as hits, Neo Cheech? Do you remember if they were
oh,
released on MTV?
yeah, Distant Early Warning was a big hit for Rush. Yeah, because it
Okay.
was
Okay.
1984. It came out. Um, MTV really just started. So there were, MTV was just starting to play videos, and they always embraced Rush. And it was an actual video. It wasn't like an exit stage left tidbit of a concert.
Concert.
It
Right,
might,
right.
might be Rush's first. No, I take that back. Subdivisions was.
Right,
Sub
right.
was an actual video. That was the first video, but this might have been like their second, or countdown on that album was a video. This is like their third video on MTV from like.
Yeah, though it's cool, man. And the only reason why I mentioned those songs is because whoops, I just said play by accident. So for our listeners, please, if you get a chance, listen to After Image and Red Sector A, Rush, off their album Grace Under Pressure. Dude, I was listening to After Image. dude, that's probably Getty's best vocals, and it's so emotional. Like I was taking a walk in the park, right?
Yeah.
And I was listening to After Image, and without knowing what really the song was about, I'm just thinking, dude, this is probably one of the greatest songs of all time.
Oh yeah, and I love how it starts off. It starts off real dissonant sounding.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
words, a lot of keyboards on that album. You know,
But they work. They don't overwhelm the song. Like they're
exactly.
perfect. They're again, and just Cheech Red Sector A, man, it's like a movie.
It
Like
totally.
I'm like
The,
I'm like it's tense, and the way
yeah,
Getty sings, it's just like, oh man,
is
like
incredible.
incredible.
Rush,
Okay,
greatest band in the world. And
greatest band in the world.
and to throw this out there, grunge did not affect Rush. Like,
Which you know what? So Cheech, because you lived in that moment,
yeah,
why? Why? Just you.
because Rush is one of those bands that everybody loved. Even the grunge kids loved Rush, believe it or not. You know what I
Well,
mean?
well, that's a significant fact,
You know,
right? Because
because
Rush is one of
like
those bands that everyone loves.
the grunge bands were probably all about my age, maybe a little bit older, and they all liked Rush. The guy in Smashing Pumpkins talks about it, in the movie. That's
Oh my goodness, that's right.
so
That's
that
right,
alone.
Billy Corgan, right?
So you wouldn't think that they wouldn't listen to Rush, but those guys they did, and Rush in when grunge came out, put out Roll the Bones in 1991. And it was, it didn't sound grungy at all. Um,
No,
it wasn't.
if anything, it sounds. I listened to it.
Mhm.
It sounds like a return to their roots.
Yeah.
Like the instrumentation is less keyboard, focused.
And the album after it, and I'm getting a brain fart, is real grungy. I can't think.
Presto, right? Presto.
No, 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 Presto's before it. Oh God,
Oh,
I should be shot. God, what is it called?
I could probably search it up really quick. Yeah, because they have a
Oh,
lot of post
I
moving
should.
pictures albums.
There's Rough Day at the Temple.
Oh, dude, it's always a rough day at the temple,
They had a song
folks.
called Stick It Out, and that was grungy as fuck. It
Oh,
had
Cheech, I'm seeing Counterparts. Is that
counterpart.
it?
I'm sorry, yeah, counterpart.
1993, the year I was born.
Wow. So counterparts is has a song called Stick It Out, real grungy in the guitars. So after 1991, Rush was kind of like, let's do some of this grunge influence. They knew how to you know get into the modern day sound and use modern day guitar riffs and guitar chords, where bands like, I'm not knocking them. It's my religion, Iron Maiden, but Maiden stayed strictly to the formula of metal. Maiden didn't get away from that, or where Rush did, and a lot of Metallica got away from it. Metallica got grungy a
Hmm.
little bit when you think the Black Album.
100%, 100%.
It got grungier after that as
The
well.
the the riffs got and we'll talk about this.
Yeah,
Metallica in the 80s, their work is very thrashy, fast
it's
guitars,
it's classic.
but then they slowed down and
Mm-hmm.
it probably
Yeah.
pissed off a lot of Metallica fans, right,
Oh,
Cheech?
I was
Is
one
that
of them. Yeah.
okay? There we go.
I mean, I stopped listening to. Sorry, Gil. I stopped listening to Metallica after the Black Album because I really loved the Black Album, but at the same time, I was like, oh man, this isn't the Metallica, like the Ride the Lightning Metallica. I mean, I bought
Right,
Kill All when it came out, the first album when I was 14,
right,
and the greatest fucking thing in the world. And I followed them through the career when Cliff Burton died.
right.
And then they got Jason Newsted, who I also worshipped, who was in a band called Flotsam and Jetsam. For those of you, I know we're supposed to be talking about grunge, but for those of you
But
who
we're
do not,
getting there. No, but we're setting up. I think that's
yes,
what we're doing.
those of you who do not know Flotsam and Jetsam, Doomsday for the Deceiver, buy that fucking album. Jason Newsted, musical genius, musical phenomenal bass player. So I followed them. We were devastated when Cliff died. It was brutal. And then they took a hiatus and they did Garage Days. And then they put out Justice for All, which was the peak of progressive metal. And I'm going to talk about that in this episode, why I was a little angry at grunge, because the progressive metal started to take off, probably because of that album, and Justice for All. I mean, songs were like 5 minutes long, intricate, and then they did their first video for one. And then the Black Album comes out right around Nevermind, because everything has to go back to like Nevermind. It has to me, that's the timeline. Nevermind, and great album. I'm
Phenomenal.
great band. Not gonna never say anything bad about Nirvana. Great band. So when the Black Album came out, they had some good songs. Some like they would have some mellow songs, and then they had some heavy songs. And I was like, okay, I like it. I bought it. I listened to it. But after that, I was like, oh man, and that goes for a lot of metal bands who got lost in the '90s. Def
Yeah.
Leppard, especially.
Oh,
They
brutal.
they were
It's brutal.
even Queensryche, this other progressive.
Oh, yep, yep. They had that one. Well, they have a lot of classic albums in the '80s, and I think, dude, would you say that Queenstrike is probably one of the prog rock innovators? I'm sorry, not prog rock, prog metal. What do you
Oh yeah,
think?
yeah,
Right?
Queensryche.
Because they had that amazing
I would say
concept album.
Queensryche, and Dream Theater, and the
Yeah.
greatest prog metal band, and I'm going to talk about them, Fate's Warning, in my opinion.
Hmm.
They're the greatest of the greatest. They're the Rush of prog metal. But
So we'll
anyway,
return. So we'll return to that now.
yeah,
Okay. So for our listeners, and you mentioned already the year 1991,
yeah,
Nirvana. Now we're just gonna set up. I'm just gonna set up the what's happening, right?
hmm,
Why are we talking about grunge? So 1991, Nirvana releases Nevermind,
yeah,
changing the rock landscape literally from day to night.
yeah.
All of the 80s metal bands, 80s rock acts that were huge. When Nirvana put out this album, if the 80s rock acts did not adapt to the changing sound, they were left behind.
They
So we're going
were.
to explore what happened, right? So, and then this genre was born out of
Mhm.
what seems to be out of Seattle, called that people named grunge, right?
Yep. Mhm.
So I guess this is where we'll start, I guess, at the beginning, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
we sort of throughout our episodes, for example, like we did with the new wave of British heavy metal, we kind of
Yeah.
trace, where do they start, right? What's the roots?
Historic, the prehistoric stuff.
The prehistoric, I guess we'll call it prehistoric grunge,
Yeah. Let me
right?
just say a couple things I got in my notes.
No.
If you want to learn about the era, 1991, 92, grunge, please watch the movie Singles
Oh
by
yeah.
directed by
I
Cameron Crowe.
it's on my I saw a clip of it. I don't know if in the documentary they showed a clip of it, and
Yeah.
I said to myself, I have to see this movie.
It's right in the epitome of when grunge blows up. Out there's performances by Soundgarden, I think Alice in Chains, Pearl
Wait, Cheech,
Jam.
I'm sorry. Wait, Cheech, directed by Cameron Crowe?
Cameron Crowe, yeah. He
Wow,
also
okay.
he also did that other one we love.
Almost Famous?
Yes, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that movie.
And that's a true story. He was
Based on him, right?
yeah, based on him.
Rolling Stone. You're right.
Great director. So to get a vibe, I think every era has a great movie, and not to bring up this cheesy movie Valley Girl that I keep talking about, but for the new wave era, Valley Girl sums it up. You know that for that sound of those bands that were out there. And same thing with Singles. Um,
Hmm.
it takes place in Seattle, and Pearl Jam's in it. They have a band called what is it called? Citizen Dick, with not Matt Damon, Matt Dillon,
Yep, yep.
and then he's like this grungy dude, and they have a song. What is the song called? Kiss Me, Dick. I mean, some shit like that. So it's actually funny. It's like a love story, and it really is the epitome of what's going on. Then I remember going to the movies and seeing it, and it was great. So that was in my notes. 1992, um, uh, Singles. Check that out. Okay, so you want me to just give a little bit of grunge information first, like prehistoric grunge?
I say yeah. So focus on the prehistoric stuff, and when you mention Neil Young, I'll jump in
Yeah.
because I'm a huge Neil Young fan. So,
Hmm.
and his influence on grunge is without a doubt tremendous. And
Massive.
I think I shared this with you that Kurt Cobain in his suicide note quoted Neil Young's song,
Yeah.
one of his songs. So yeah. So
because he
yeah,
was
so
a
I guess you'll start it off.
yeah, and was he was from Seattle? No, he's from Canada, but something.
He's from Canada.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So grunge, the prehistoric years. All right. Yeah, have you ever heard of the band the MC5?
Yeah. Kick out the jams, right?
Check out the jams. That's grunge, man. It's
For
grunge
sure.
in the birthing. Like, I love that word you invented. I'm gonna steal it from you. Birthing. The
Love it.
the birthing Manny. I just the Manny language. Birthing. I
You know, it's
just
funny, Cheech, as an aside, I always like when I'm teaching or whatever, I make up words or something like I
yeah.
even give a warning to people. I made this word up. It's not legit.
Not to throw Russian again, but really quick, you made me think. I read one time when Neil said he tried to learn the definition of a new word every day.
Getting a
So
professor.
so
Amazing.
kids out there in college do that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So MC5, and I believe they were at Woodstock, right? I think
Um,
it might have been.
that's a great point. You know what? I wouldn't be shocked. And Cheech, do you know where they're from? Were they from Detroit?
They were from Detroit, I
Right,
believe.
MC5. And they were, yeah, dude. I would describe their sound as like proto garage rock.
Exact.
Um, he has that one famous song, Kick Out the Jams, Muff, you
Yeah.
know, like
Like that could have been out in the 90s easily, you know.
oh, for sure. Dude, they
So
could have been alternative.
oh yeah, I consider them the fathers of grunge. They definitely are. Then, a couple other ones. This is a song we all know. I think it's an Animal House or whatever, if you don't know it. The Kingsmen, Louie Louie.
Yep, yep,
That's considered like frat rock, garage rock. Then an
yep, yep.
obscure band called the Sonics. Check
Hmm,
them out. They're the original garage band. Then the Ventures, we talked
right,
about. Now
right.
they're a surf band, and I had the honor of opening up for them at 7 Willow Street in Portchester back in the day.
Amazing.
Went on right before them to like a packed house with this band Cosmic Strings I played with. And then Paul Revere and the Raiders. So those
Mhm.
are the prehistoric 60s grunge bands. Okay,
Wait,
now I'm gonna
wait, Cheech, Cheech. Can I add one more? Like
of course
this is just my opinion, but dude, I don't you can't forget also the Kinks
I would
because they had that garage rock sound that
they
kind of like
did. They did.
like kind of like I call it
That,
like I think grungy sound. Like they were
that,
innovators.
that really got me. Like that kind of like
That whole album, that debut. Now it's funny though, the Kinks end up leaving that sound. So one of my favorite albums, Cheech, is the Green Preservation Society.
oh yeah, yeah, I know that album.
We Are the Village Green Preservation Society, which is my favorite albums, but they leave that sound behind. But on
Yeah.
their first album, it's all kind of like garagey rock.
Yeah, yeah. Ray Davies and who was the brother?
Both Davies, Ray Davies, and
I forget the
oh, I
guy.
forgot his
One of them
name.
married Chrissy Hines, which is like I I forgot. I got to bring up the Pretenders on this too. Like that the Pretenders were like an 1978, 79 rock band, but they definitely had a grunge thing about them, an alternative thing about them.
No,
Early,
alternative for sure.
definitely. Okay, so your boy Neil Young.
My boy Neil Young. So before we go to Neil Young, Cheech, are you a Neil Young fan?
I worship Neil Young and Crazy Horse. I had the live album.
Dude, oh my goodness. Okay. So
The
Neil
down
Young, Crazy Horse, forget about it.
Well, Crazy Horse is grunt. The band
The
sounds
whole
like
band.
rhythm section, and and the way Neil Young plays guitar, it's a lot like Cobain studied him. Obviously,
Obviously.
not. I mean, he's not. He wasn't Jimi Hendrix. He wasn't Jimmy Page, but he's Neil fucking Young. Yet nobody
I
sounds
would
like.
say so. You know what's funny? Um, so I love Neil Young, obsessed with the dude. I love all his albums, especially his 70s and Crazy Horse work, which is probably some of the best stuff.
Oh yeah,
But it's funny, and I love the point you just made that Kurt Cobain, he's considered a guitar hero of sorts. Now
uh,
it's interesting because Kurt Cobain, no, 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 no. Okay, this is the critic's opinion, right? The general. Now that being said,
yeah.
like Neil Young, see, Neil Young was not the most technical player. He wasn't the most innovative player.
But he had
He
he had
just, yeah, yeah. He had a feel, and I think Kurt Cobain had the same thing where they would play these riffs and
Yeah.
kind of I kind of see it as, well, Jimi Hendrix was like, total innovator, genius. Eddie Van Halen, or these are like guitar masters.
Right, right.
Neil Young instead, kind of, how would you describe it? He would just like feel it out, and his
Yeah, it
music is always like
was like
feel.
his note choices were simple and he used motifs. He wasn't ripping, he just played to the song, and that's what great songwriter guitar players do. You know, the opposite of a Steve Vai. No disrespect to Steve Vai. I worship Steve Vai as a shredder, but he couldn't write a song like Neil Young. He could only
Right,
write a Steve
right.
Vai writing song. I'm sure Steve Vai could write a song, but he doesn't choose to. Let's put it that way.
No, Cheech, that is such a great point, because so going back to Kurt Cobain, so nobody could write a song like Kurt Cobain.
Right.
The way I see what he did, very similar to Neil Young.
Yeah.
He would kind of like deconstruct a little bit,
Hmm.
right? And he wouldn't, and I love what you just said. Like he writes like a guitar player kind of. So
Yeah.
that
It's a
shows up all over Nevermind.
Yeah. And I gotta say, Kurt Cobain, he looks so fucking cool. Even though
Oh,
he
dude,
had
forget
a nerd
about it.
sweater on or a flannel shirt that like my grandfather would have worn. The guy looked, he was going fucking ape shit on
Cheech,
stage, you know?
Cheech, let me tell you. So when I discovered Nirvana, I think I was in late high school, right? So and I saw the way he was dressed. I was like, dude, I want to copy his style. Like I was trying to get like he had like these like flannels,
Yeah.
jeans, Converse.
It was
Love the
very
style.
thrift shop. Like he
Yeah.
probably he had no money, so he probably went to the thrift store and bought, it was probably all used clothes. You know what I mean? That's what I would imagine.
You use
Look,
unwashed.
and I gotta throw, you gotta throw bones. I mean, Dave Grohl is phenomenal,
Oh,
a fucking great drummer. And again, not to bring our boys up, but him being friends with Rush,
oh.
inducting them into the Hall of Fame. I love Dave Grohl for that fact.
No, and you know what's funny? You mentioned that. Rest in peace, Taylor Hawkins, who
Yeah.
was in the Foo Fighters. Huge Rush fan. I love his interviews in the documentary.
Hmm.
Like he was amazing. Rest in peace, to that legend.
Yeah.
Drummer. He took out the drumming in Foo Fighters, right? So
Yeah. But Dave Grohl actually played on the early like Foo Fighter stuff. When
he
Taylor
did.
Hawkins videos, that's all Dave Grohl doing all that
Yep.
shit. Grohl is a great drummer. And Chris Novoselic, the bass player, fucking great bass player. All these grunge guys had great bass players. And the best
Wow.
bass player, I think, out of the grunge guys is Jeff Ament from Pearl Jam.
Oh, dude, I literally was gonna say, see, I didn't know his name. Huge Pearl Jam fan, and I love Pearl Jam for their bass lines. And the bass player is probably one of the most coolest looking bass players. Like, if you ever seen him perform live,
Mm-hmm. And
phenomenal. And I
what's special is he used a fretless. And you
was,
listen to like live, the guy's using a fretless on there, and he's doing some really cool jamming. And I mean, Pearl Jam, phenomenal band. I love them. I probably like them more than Nirvana,
yeah,
but
that's my controversial opinion. I probably like Pearl Jam the best out of the big like grunge top five or whatever, but
Big Four.
big four.
Uh,
But we'll return to that. But just going back to Neil Young, right?
yeah.
So Neil Young, I definitely think encapsulates with his band Crazy Horse,
Mhm.
encapsulates that early, the sort of like the roots of the grunge sound, right? So
Yeah.
sparse playing, kind of grungy guitar riffs, little bit of distortion.
Yeah.
The rhythm section has to be kind of how would you describe the rhythm section like in a Crazy Horse song?
Solid. Like,
Yep.
okay, in grunge, there was no Steve Harris or Geddy Lee. You know
I
what
was
I
gonna
mean?
say,
There
right,
was,
right.
but except for Green Day, but I don't consider that grunge. I don't know. That's
They're the new alternative that Nirvana opened doors
yeah.
to.
That fucking guy. What's his name? Something Mike Dirt, I think his name was the bass player. That
Yep.
guy was fucking amazing. And then there was another band called Rancid, who the bass player was even better than that guy. But there were some really good bass players, but there weren't any like super, except for Jeff Ament. There weren't any super amazing like Geddy Lee, Steve Harris type of bass players in grunge. In my opinion,
Right.
they just
Right.
made shit play, and that goes back to our boy Roger Waters. We said who's like the innovator, the father of. Though he looks like he could have been in a grunge band and some of those,
100%.
you know,
Oh,
he's like a grunge innovator of a bass player because he used a P bass with a pick, and a lot of those grunge guys, they sounded like I would always think, well, that sounds like Roger Waters, you know. Um, uh, some of these bands that I like. I mean, they're cheesy, but I like the band Jim Blossom a lot because I like their bass player
oh, no,
sound.
Cheech, Gin, and talk about just and we'll return to like the new alternative, but Gin Blossoms was one of those bands that, they were like in the grunge movement, sort of
Yeah.
they sort of get like, typecast there, but they also represent kind of like the new alternative sound that was
Mhm.
emerging, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, but dude, solid points. And just one more thing on Neil Young. I also think he influenced the style because Neil Young was all about flannels, jeans,
Oh
ripped
yeah.
jeans,
And
So
and just to give two Neil Young songs that are grunge, Cinnamon Girl
oh,
and
100%.
Down by the River. I think one of my favorite
100%.
rock songs. Uh, so you got to throw Black Sabbath in there too, because they would tune down to C sharp or D,
Right.
and that's the grunge. Sabbath might be the fathers of heavy metal doom and the fathers of doom grunge.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
every grunge band talks about Sabbath. Every
Yep.
band, even Cobain and Utero especially, gets very grungy with
Yep.
Sabbath riffs. And here's a band I thought was grungy: Iggy Pop and the Stooges, just for his
Oh,
insanity. He was
I was gonna say, dude,
Anthony.
yeah, I think that's like in terms of prehistoric grunge.
Yeah,
So Iggy Pop is definitely, frontman wise, and especially some of his early albums, like, that distorted sound. Nothing
yeah.
quite like it.
Wait, he was punk, but it wasn't like the Pistols or the Damned. He was like his own, almost like the Dolls a little bit. But he was like
Yeah.
fighting himself on stage. He was insane, Iggy Pop.
I think he cut himself too. Like you do crazy stuff like that,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like I
No,
seen a picture of him like he's bleeding on stage. I was like, dude, what the?
worst thing I ever seen to bring up Nirvana was at MTV Music Awards right when they won and they were huge. They performed. This is so God. I don't know if the guy broke his nose. So Nirvana's playing, and for you old fogies like me, you probably remember this. Novoselic, like the bass player, I think he had an old fucking bass. It might have been like a fucking oh God, like a Thunderbird or some old heavy bass. He throws it up in the air and it hits him in his face.
Ooh.
And I don't know if he passed out afterward. I just was like, oh, this guy's fucked right now. I mean, I have a 1978 P bass. I would never throw it up in the air, but if I did and it hit me in the face, I'd have a concussion easily. That was just a fun fact that I remember. So leading up, now we went from the 60s to the 70s,
Yep.
up to the 80s to my boy, Henry Rollins.
Yep. Yep.
Huge influence in the 80s on grunge. You know,
Yep.
that's the beginning of grunge in the 80s.
Oh,
Then
yep.
band from Seattle. Once again, this is all, Seattle. Now it starts to go to Seattle.
Right.
Green River. If you don't know Green River, you need to check Green River out. They are one of the big innovators of grunge. It's not called grunge, mind you, at this time. It's just,
No, no.
I would say maybe indie rock, or it would be called,
Yeah.
or
I would kind of describe their sound as since it's in America, like post-punk. Like it's
post.
all
Yeah,
post because the music is very fast, it's aggressive, right?
mm-hmm.
Right,
Come on,
very raw.
the album "Come On Down" 1985. Check that out. Definitely post punk. Then there's a band, obscure band called Bam Bam, which is also considered the innovators in grunge. Give It to Me is the album, and Kurt Cobain was the roadie, which is an
Mm.
interesting
You
fact.
can't, but that's so significant though.
Yeah, and they were really good. I checked them out. And then in 1988, a band called Mudhoney comes out. and they're members of Green River that form Mudhoney. Then I have the Melvins, I Flies, 1987. The huge grunge band. Um, Mudhoney, which was members of Green River. Then this leads us up now, getting closer to Nevermind. Okay, that's the timeline, you know.
Yeah.
Mother Love Bone, great band. Mother Love Bone had Stone Gosser and our boy Jeff Ahmet on bass, and sadly Andrew Wood, the singer, who passed away. Uh, so they definitely were huge innovators. Then I have oh no, my head's gonna get cut off. Another great band, if you don't know them, Dinosaur Jr.
Mhm.
That's a band from that era. Okay, now, so we're moving up to the 90s, and you know, this is where I'm confused. I had where are you? I had Bad Motor Finger, 1991. I'm sorry, Louder Than Love. That's the Soundgarden album. It came out in
Mhm.
1988, and then Bad Motor Finger came out in 91. I had Facelift in 1990. Man in the Box comes out. That's metal. I'm
That's
listening to
metal.
that and No Prayer for the Dying by Maiden as I'm drinking Michelobes. You know what I mean? So it's like, this is like fucking metal and
It's
Soundgarden.
metal.
So just because they're from Seattle, they
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
mocked for that. I mean, they're grungy in a Sabbath way.
Well, you know what's funny? With going back to Soundgarden, before so in the 90s they have a super album, right? Super Unknown, I think it's called.
Yeah.
But their sound, I always see it sort of like a Zeppelin Black Sabbath sound. I don't really see it as a
Well,
grungy sound.
think about this. They got one of the greatest singers. No, no, no.
Chris
Okay.
Cornell, yeah. Yeah.
So like we didn't even talk about that. Like grunge singers were okay. Let's face it, you know.
Wait, pause right there. So it's funny because grunge singers they kind of get mocked. I think after the grunge movement, I think
Yeah.
a lot of them got mocked
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
especially like Eddie Vedder.
Yeah, that
Um, I,
they
yeah,
were they were singing from the throat, like you know, that kind of, and it's a cool sound. It's an innovative sound. Nobody sounded like Eddie Vedder, you know, and nobody sounded like Scott Weiland. Nobody sounded like these guys. So they all were unique. But there wasn't a Robert Plant. There wasn't an Ian Gillan.
no,
There
no,
wasn't a Geddy Lee. And that's not a disrespect.
no.
Vocals weren't a big thing. Having a great vocalist wasn't a big thing. But um, you know, when you think about Chris Cornell, that fucker has a great
Oh,
fucking voice. Like
uh,
it's up there with the.
rock and roll with Freddie Mercury, Robert
Oh,
Plant.
so he was an oddball if you think about it. You know, like um. So to me, these guys are, you know, and don't get me wrong, Nirvana's around. This is 1989. Bleach comes out, so there's a
Yeah.
band called Nirvana out there, but they're not. Why didn't Bleach become Nevermind? You know, like what was the deal? Like this is like the philosophy, or to try to figure this out,
Well,
the puzzle. Why
well, I
didn't
will say, yeah.
become?
So before we go there,
Yeah,
so unfortunately, Mrs. Doubtfire crept in.
fuck
So we have
Doubtfire.
2 minutes and 40
We didn't
seconds. So
even scratch the surface.
no. So but you did? Okay. So before before gets cut off and we join ourselves for the next part, so okay, so you did a wonderful job explaining sort of the prehistoric grunge, right? So 60s, 70s, this sound was in development, right? So a lot of these bands like Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell, and when I say bands, I mean the singers, artists,
Yeah.
post-punk like Black Flag and all that, they were already influenced by sounds that came before, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So you mentioned a bunch of these great bands, and I think quickly there's one that Husker Du,
Well, I have
and
talk
is
about
that
in the next episode. Can we bring up some
okay?
alternative? Because they're not grunge.
No.
Yeah.
But the point is, so what's happening here, and for our listeners, right? So it's interesting because part of what we'll talk about in the next episode is Nirvana in 1993. For some odd reason, Nevermind becomes the most biggest thing on the planet. but Nevermind is not really that innovative nor original.
No,
So
I
right,
I
and
agree.
and I'll be honest with you, there are
Album, it's a great album. And
great
to,
album.
I don't know how many seconds we have. Husker Du should have been fucking Nirvana in the '80s, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Bob
yeah.
Mold is a musical genius. But yeah, we'll talk more about alternative groups that inspired these guys as well. Um, but yeah, no disrespect
No,
to
no.
Nirvana, but I don't really see the big deal in Nevermind. I just I think it's a great album, and I love it. I got sick of it because I had to learn every song from my bass students in cover bands, but really good shit. In Bloom, Lithium. I love Chris Novoselic as a bass player. Gotta love
And Dave Grohl's drumming.
gotta love it. You gotta.
Whew,
And Cobain he was a great frontman. He really was.
100%.
I don't like when people knock him because you got to give that guy credit. You got
Yeah.
to a lot of metal guys are haters on oh, he sucks. No, he doesn't. Kurt Cobain was a very very talented guy. I give him that. Was never should never mind had been as big as it is. I think his albums that are way better than that. I'd say the Goo Goo Dolls Hold Me Up album is fucking just as good or better. And all right, so I'll just talk about some of the alternative bands. We mentioned the grunge bands, from the Black Flags to the Mud Honeys up to the Nirvana, the Great Nirvana.
Oh, Cheech, wait. Sorry to interrupt, but okay, before you mention the alternative bands,
Yeah,
what did the rock music landscape look like in the 80s and
me
starting late
personally.
80s? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you my personal thing. In the late '80s, I was obsessed. I listened to alternative music. Um, there was a show called 120 Minutes in Alternative Nation on MTV. It was on I can't remember where I parked my car, but I could remember what I did. 20 fucking 30 years now. That's how old I am. Sunday nights, um, they would have a show called Alternative Nation, and what it would be, they would show. I would get exposed to alternative bands like Bob Mold, Husker Du, The Replacements, The Cure. And being a metalhead, this was a taboo. This was like, you couldn't talk about this, you know. So it was cool because 120 minutes on a Sunday night, and then after that, you stayed up late and you watched. I'm going to show my age. The Young Ones. I don't know if you know about the Young Ones. They were an English comedy. Only people my age will know this. So Sunday night was the night where you just stayed up, and then Monday at school you were just exhausted. So I'd go to school on a Monday with my Slayer shirt on, trying to grow my hair, my Amber Vision sunglasses, and I'd go to my friend Anthony. Hey, did you watch 120 minutes last night? Oh yeah. See the new Husker Du video? Fucking awesome. Oh, here come the guys. Hey, what's up, guys? Fucking new Slayer's out. Yeah, Slayer, And we loved that shit too, but you couldn't bring it up because of these meathead metalheads that weren't open to listening. Oh, you could like Motley Crue because if you like Motley Crue, girls are gonna, chicks are gonna dig it. Oh, I like Poison. Oh, yeah, that's cool. I hated them, but girls will talk to you. You got a friggin' face warning shirt on or a fucking diamond head shirt on. If you're like, who's this fucking weirdo? But anyway, so that's my 120-minute story. So that's how I got into the Replacements, the Goo Goo Dolls, Violent Femmes, all those types of bands. And in 1990, I was obsessed with prog metal, and this is where grunge gets me angry. Okay, just quick stories. So I was in a prog metal band, listening to bands, and I definitely sent you some of these bands. Annihilator,
Mhm.
they had an album called Alice in Hell. They were about to break in 1991 with Never Neverland. The Great Fates Warning, which I'll get into. A band called Lethal. A band called Watchtower. A band called um, Toxic. An album. Think this. Check this out. Check that album out. A band called Sanctuary. So I'm listening to all this prog shit. The complete opposite of what grunge was. as well as Husker Du. And all of a sudden, I'm hearing that, my favorite band in the world, Fates Warning, is coming out with this album, Parallels, produced by the great Terry Brown.
Wow.
This was going to make Fates Warning on on the Rush level, beyond Queensryche, better than Dream Theater. Comes out in 1991. Terry Brown produces it. And guess what happens? Nevermind came out.
Ooh.
And it didn't do what it should have done. As far as I'm concerned, Fates Warning should be up there with Rush, And then another sad thing, metal band suffered. So Motorhead played 7 Willow Street in Portchester. It's a club that holds maybe 800 people during this time. I saw Iron Maiden at the Academy and at Birch Hill in New Jersey. Maybe 800, 1,000 people. They had a different singer, Blaze Bailey, formerly of a band Wolfsbane. But, so this is where the state of metal was. So grunge hurt me because my metal was like, where's my metal? But yet, thank God for bands like Pantera, Corrosion of Conformity. You could say Metallica and Guns N' Roses, they snuck, but they, they kind of didn't. Pantera was balls out. We talked about this. You like vulgar display. Cowboys
Yeah.
from Hell.
No, I was gonna say, it's crazy because, so yeah, if people look at me, they wouldn't think I would love. I'll be like a metalhead myself. Um, but I have to say, the fact that this album, I'm just gonna pull it up. The fact that this album, first of all, was huge.
Yeah.
It came out. It's called Vulgar Display of Power. It
Mm-hmm.
came out in 1992,
Yeah.
and it's probably like my favorite song on the album is Rise.
Oh,
It's so
every
fast.
the
It's
first 3
so
Pantera albums,
aggressive.
genius. And the crazy thing is, Cowboys from Hell came out when Nevermind came out, and these fuckers blew up. I mean, they kept metal alive. And I don't know why it didn't happen for Annihilator, Never Neverland, or Fate's Warning. I mean, they had careers, they had great careers, and they still continue to make great music. But grunge definitely stopped a lot of these bands from. If grunge never happened, it would be a different story for these bands, and that made me pissed. Seeing Iron Maiden at the Academy, I was like, so cool to see Steve Harris literally in front of me. But I'm like, holy shit, man, Maiden's playing like almost clubs again.
Right.
This is sad. Motorhead. The crazy story was Lemmy got into. I remember I used to play 7 Willow Street, and I could have met him. I should have just left my job. And went to the. I wasn't at the temple yet, so they said the guy who owned the place called my friend. My friend called me. He said Lemmy's at 7 Willow Street. We could go meet him. So I think we went a little later to go meet him, and we weren't even 21 yet. We were like 20. So we're like, "Where's Lemmy?" He's at the strip club, the Diamond Club. There was a big strip club in Portchester. They should bring that shit back, the Diamond Club. And Lemmy was at the Diamond Club from like 11 o'clock a.m. till showtime with Mickey D and these guys getting all fucked up, And that was the amazing story about Motorhead in Portchester, and there's a lot of people that saw that show. So, but it was sad. Anthrax played at 7 Willow Street, so they started to have metal, but it was like, oh yeah, these has-been 80s bands are playing. I used to get so pissed, man, and I was in the metal. I always played in metal bands all through this time. And then we had to learn the Nirvana stuff. So we were doing Black Sabbath, we're doing Deep Purple, Maiden, and the club owners were like, I think it was a bar called the 4NF. Like, would you guys mind playing some modern stuff? I said, we are. We're playing the Black Rose. That's a band that snuck through the cracks like Pantera.
Another one,
So,
yeah.
so on the opposite end, the metal side, you had Pantera, and then you had Black Crowes bringing back Humble Pie, bringing back the Faces. So I said, yeah, we're playing the Black Crowes. And he's like, no. I want you to play Nirvana, and I want you to play, some Pearl Jam. And I was like, motherfucker, I don't want to play the shit. I want to play. So then, not that it's shit, but you know what I mean? So like, then we learned Alive, which is a great song, Jeremy, In Bloom, Lithium, so that's my my debatable grunge stories, like why it hurt me because destroyed my metal, But it is what it is. Metal was dying anyway
Right.
on the glam side of things. Maiden had a career still. Fear of the Dark came out in about 91 and it was doing good. And Maiden could have kept going, but Bruce Dickinson decided to leave in 94.
Right. Right.
And then they kind of tanked. This is only in America. Maiden, Motorhead, Fates
Huge
Warning.
outside of America.
Yeah, they could go anywhere
Yeah.
and play festivals,
Well,
but
it's funny because I was when and we're going to return to the alternative in a
yeah.
sec. But it's funny because when Nirvana released Nevermind, right?
Hmm.
I was reading somewhere that okay, on the charts was Guns N' Roses Use Your Illusion. You had
Right.
Michael Jackson. So this is before it came out. But the point is Nevermind toppled these albums.
Yeah, I think
So
if people,
Guns N' Roses were kind of like on their last leg. They released that massive double
yeah,
album,
yeah, yeah,
Use
yeah.
Your Illusion. There was one other album too. So yeah, and I agree with you. I think at that point, metal was dying, and metal focused too much on hair metal, which was becoming a
I was.
joke at that point.
It was a joke. There were bands like Valentine, Enough's Enough, um, Jailhouse. I liked these bands. Every Mother's Nightmare. I liked them. They were great, but it was all about the hair. They had the songs, but the record labels were, actually Warrant, who was a good band, kind of snuck through. I remember a story Janie Lane saying from Warrant that when Cherry Pie, remember, I don't know if you know Cherry Pie. I actually
Some
told you
more,
a horrible podcast that I heard about what happened to this guy.
yeah, yeah,
But anyway, it's a different time for different story. But when Cherry Pie blew up, he's sitting at the record label and the president of the company is like, "You guys are going to get a 5 album deal. You're going to be the next big thing." And the next year he goes in there, all he sees is pictures of Pearl Jam, Nevermind, or whatever, and they're like, "I got some
yeah.
bad news for you. I think we're going to drop you after this album." And they had some great songs, Warrant. They were a hair band. They kind of snuck through it. Skid Row kind of snuck through it. They were a hair band, they were 89, 90, were
Yeah.
still good music. So, but yeah, so to get to the alternative, it's going to name a few I liked. Uh, Sonic Youth. I don't know
Yep.
if you great band, Kim Gordon, a different
Yep.
type
Uh,
there.
they
Thurston Moore.
have Teenage Riot. It's an
Yeah.
amazing song. Yep.
So they're up there. The Violent Femmes, of course, Husker Du. I cannot stop
That's good.
talking
Yeah.
about them. The Replacements,
Yeah. I was
who,
gonna, no, I was gonna say with like the replacements with the album Let It Be, which is one of my
yeah,
favorite albums of all time, and they have other great albums, but
yeah,
that album alone cements their spot in the alternative scene.
oh yeah,
And they wrote a song called Left of the Dial, right?
hmm,
So this was sort of like the alternative radio station, and I
yeah.
love it because it kind of puts in song, right? Left of the Dial. You gotta go.
And there's a great documentary on them on I think it's on Netflix on the Replacements. And then the Goo Goo Dolls. People forget the Goo Goo Dolls, who I am not ashamed to say I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of the Goo Goo Dolls before they got real fucking commercial with a boy named Goo with like Iris and
Right,
name.
right.
Not a fan of those songs, but 1987, the first Goo Goo Dolls album came out. 1989, Jed came out, and then 1990, Hold Me Up, a phenomenal album. I would go and see the Goo Goo Dolls. That's how much of a big fan I was. I would hang out with those dudes in their tour bus. There were nobodies then. Then all of a sudden they said we're coming out but there's a great album, Superstar Car Wash '94. Then when they did A Boy Named Goo, they said yeah, we got signed to a major label now, and they were signed. They were on the same label as Fates Warning, that's why I got into them. The Metal Blade Records, and they were like these weird alternative bands. I don't know why they were on Metal Blade, but they got signed, and I was like, oh, you guys are on a major label now, and I was bummed out, like, oh, that's not cool. Now everyone's going to know about the Goo Goo Dolls. You're not a secret. And Christ, did everybody know about them? And then they focused on John Resnick, Pretty Boy, and then they're I don't know. I fucking lost them after that. I couldn't. But anything up to A Boy Named Goo, check the Goo Goo Dolls out. Don't listen to Iris and that garbage. Sorry, but yeah. So that's the basics of alternative. Anything you want to add to alternative?
Another influential act is REM from
Oh
Georgia.
yes,
So in the
definitely.
80s, they probably have some of the best alternative albums, and they're interesting because so when Nirvana 1991 afterwards REM kind of, I don't know how they changed their sound a little bit, and it started with this album called, I think, Automatic for the People,
Yeah,
and they changed their sound. So it's not that they were influenced by grunge per se, but this is my opinion. I could be totally wrong, but I think they saw the emerging sounds that were coming.
they
So
were
they were
smart.
one of the bands that they had to adapt. Like they have to kind of
Yeah.
change because they knew that,
Hmm.
all right, this is the sound. Now they were not grunge, but for
Yeah.
example, they had the song "Losing My Religion," which
Yeah.
lyrically sounds like a grunge song, but
Hmm. That's
melodically REM took risks. Like with the Madeline. No,
yeah.
the what's that instrument called? Cheech, the
Oh, ukulele or a mandolin?
mandolin with that
Yeah.
mandolin.
Yeah. I
So, but
mean,
REM,
REM goes back to like 83, maybe,
oh yeah,
80. They had a good run, REM.
they did.
An underrated bass player. Talk about a Fender P bass sound.
Yeah,
Check Frequency Kenneth. What a fucking great bass line. Almost sounds like Geddy Lee. I don't know that guy's name, but he was good.
I was gonna say, yeah,
I'm just gonna give some elements of grunge, what makes it grunge, and you can tell me how you feel. Do you agree? Heavy distorted guitars,
yeah, for
uh,
sure.
strong beats, drum beats, and a
Yep,
great example
yep,
opening to Teen Spirit. Grohl
yeah.
just pissed
Iconic
that.
drum beat.
Growling or screaming, and the
Yep.
song that mine is "Rape Me."
Yep, yep. Off in utero at
fucked up,
Nirvana.
fucked up topic or whatever, but a great
Yeah.
song. He's screaming, "Rape me!" I actually did that with a cover band. I chose that one. You know,
Yo,
Hank.
what an interesting song title though. That's Kurt Cobain for you.
Yeah,
He was in
what's
pain.
mind? Probably got raped by what's her name, Courtney Love, poor bastard. You know what I mean? Angst, issues, personal struggles, and flannel shirts.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think those are the elements of grunge, and they will become so after grunge's time, they become sort of like parodies,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know? So, but yeah, no, 100%. I like all those descriptions, and you probably described most of the grunge bands.
yeah. And then alternative, quick. I'll just run through it. Non-mainstream, not to be commercial, like a band we know from Canada. Uh,
Yep, yep,
Punk, folk, and electric elements. This
yep,
one is definitely like Rush. Creative expression, but not to have commercial success.
yep,
They didn't want that. So alternative is like, heavy metal, and there's different genres of it, that would be like
yeah,
the way I had it. You have grunge, the most popular, indie, Britpop, industrial, post-punk, college rock. I'm not going to get into all that shit,
no,
but
no, no,
those are just, the subgenres like black metal, death metal, thrash metal,
yeah.
if it was metal, that kind of thing.
No, and the reason why I think we're mentioning alternative is because the sort of before grunge was grunge, it was I thought it was considered part of the alternative scene,
It was. I mean,
right?
Hustle
So
2 is definitely grungy at times, and they're alternative. They're not considered grunge,
right,
but they're
right,
an alternative band that influenced Cobain most definitely,
for
definitely.
sure,
Uh,
sure.
so those would be the elements of that. So you want to talk about the big four in
Yeah,
in the importance of the big four
yeah,
bands.
yeah, yeah.
I think we agree about the big four.
So and just before we do, really quick, so you mentioned before Alice in Chains. Now it's interesting because Alice in Chains um before they became grunge were kind of part of the hair metal scene, right?
They were.
So they're kind of interesting how they kind of changed their sound when
Yeah.
they started hearing sounds like from other alternative bands and post-punk bands like Black Flag and Husker Du.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's actually one more alternative band that we kind of forgot, the Pixies,
Oh, of
which were a
course.
huge influence on Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, that's true. They were a good band, and they went on to be another band in the grunge era.
Yeah,
I forgot.
yeah,
I forgot what band they formed. There was a Cannonball, I think the song was that they had. Whatever
yeah,
band that was,
yeah,
brains not there, but
yeah.
um,
But back to the big four. First
yeah,
one, I just mentioned them, Alice in Chains. They
yeah.
have they have I think my opinion, but they have two iconic albums. The first one is you mentioned it before, Facelift. The
Man in the Box.
second, Man in the Box, which is one of
I
those
mean,
I think
that's
grunge anthems.
metal. That's heavy metal to me. That's
But it's metal, right, right. Um, and probably one of the best grunge albums, in my opinion, is better than Nevermind,
dirt,
Dirt, which
definitely.
came out in 1992. So a year after Nirvana, Dirt comes out, right? And this was a massive album for Alice in Chains. They had some
Hmm.
hits too, and the top hit on that album, Wood, right? Which was
Oh,
I
what
think
and, I'm going back to my cover band days. We covered that, and that's what the original bass player. The original bass player, I think he left after the first album, and they got a great bass player, Mike Inez. And then once Alice in Chains broke up, he joined Ozzy's band for many years. Just a
hmm,
little side note about that. But yeah, I love Wood. Wood is that's my favorite Alice in Chains song, I would say.
it's amazing. And I say on that album, my favorite song, I actually have three, and I want to hear your thoughts. And
Mm-hmm.
this is Dirt, 1992's Dirt. One is Them Bones, which opens up the album.
Great.
So amazing. It's so heavy lyrically. They go really dark. Like literally, the album is called Dirt.
Yeah.
Like the next one, Cheech, Damn That River,
Yep.
Damn That River,
Mm-hmm.
and one of my favorite ones personally, Angry Chair.
Oh yeah, I forgot about.
Ooh, it sounds Sabbath, dude. Have you ever listened to it? It sounds dark.
Remember,
It's like a Halloween song.
now remember, MTV's still around. So
Yep.
MTV is playing this shit 24/7. You know, I remember all the videos. Now that you're saying this, it's like wow, getting flashbacks.
And it's crazy how MTV, like what we kind of argued about in the our episode on the new wave of British heavy metal, MTV plays a huge role in promoting some of the sounds and bands, right?
Yeah.
Pushing them to like the forefront. This is like before the internet.
Oh yeah.
MTV was music, and it will end up kind of influencing and spreading grunge even more.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah, great point you made.
MTV totally did. And they got rid of Headbangers Ball. So metal was gone. They used to have Headbangers Ball. Then they had like Headbangers Hour, and they got rid of that. So metal was gone at that point. So the next one we could say, Soundgarden,
Yep.
and I think well they came out before Alice in Chains. I'm trying to look at my.
So it's funny, Soundgarden was always part of the alternative scene in Seattle. Like they were always a huge underground act.
And I
And they I know for so just looking at and this is also based on they had an album 1989 Louder Than Love,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
which was already the start of their rise. They already had already a massive album in 1991, Bad Motorfinger. It's the same
Yep.
time the Nirvana released their album. They
Right.
released that album.
But the fact
That's
that they came out in 1989, it's
right.
like that's metal. That's not even grunge. And they sounded like Sabbath with Chris Cornell's amazing voice. So I consider both bands we just mentioned, Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, metal, not grunge. But
Yeah.
because this is interesting, they're from Seattle. Both of these bands are from Seattle. Okay, and I'm gonna get to my point on this. it means anything. And the next, any more on Soundgarden?
One more massive album, 1994, Super Unknown, which is
Incredible.
probably the album everybody knows. Everybody knows the song Black Hole Sun, Fell
Yeah.
on Black Days. So
Mm.
I feel as though that Soundgarden, this is their massive album. And
Oh yeah.
afterwards, I mean, they still made stuff, but this is my personal opinion, but I feel as though they closed out grunge in the best way possible,
Yeah.
right?
I think
So
they definitely.
yeah, the Soundgarden, amazing. I agree. They sound metal, hard rock.
Oh yeah. Well, and Cornell is a big part of that. You know, his voice is just been,
Yeah.
phenomenal guy. And then we have Pearl Jam, who came out, I think, in '92. I don't think it was '91.
So
I'm not
Pearl
sure.
Jam,
This
I can
10,
check
I think
that.
10 came out in '90, might have been '91. I think it's '92, from what I can
So
remember.
I can check right now. But so Pearl Jam, which is my favorite of the one of well, I have to say top. All of them are amazing, but if I had to pick
Yeah.
Pearl Jam, 1991, again, same time as
So it is,
Nirvana's Nevermind.
yeah. So all these
They
albums came out
10.
like one. Yeah, 10. 10
They
is phenomenal.
released 10.
Black, the song Black.
Oh,
Uh,
dude, and it's funny, I was telling shout out to Gil. He heard me singing that song because again, I'm not depressed or anything. The song's so dark. So usually with grunge, their lyrics get really, angsty,
yeah.
dark, and it's just Black is just an amazing song. Eddie Vedder gives one of his best vocals.
Oh, he does. And the bass
Um,
line is so sick.
oh,
Credit. And the
dude.
guitar, Stone Gossard. Those guys were no joke. Those,
Oh,
those guys can play. All these bands, Alice in Chains, Jerry Cantrell. Yeah, Jerry,
amazing players.
great guitar player. I forgot the guy's name in Soundgarden. Great guitar player. Um, and then you know, you get in the Pearl Jam, and they're more classic rock than metal.
I would say classic rock. Just my opinion, their album 10 joins the ranks of Led Zeppelin 4's,
Yeah,
your Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody.
yeah.
It's just such a great album. Every song is a 10 out of 10, and they could jam.
And
That's the thing too.
why didn't they become what you call it a team of Nirvana? Why wasn't that Nevermind?
Well, you know what's funny? I think we'll return to that question. Um, because I think we'll close out with that philosophy part,
Yeah,
like why, for example, Soundgarden should have been like, or
yeah,
uh, Alice in Chains could have been also the face of grunge, but I think
yeah.
people always think Nirvana, people always think Kurt Cobain,
Hmm?
so we'll return to that. And in 1993, back to Pearl Jam, they released Versus, and they close out 1994 with Vitology.
Vitology is a great. I love that album.
I was gonna say, in my opinion, great
Versus
predecessor.
that have Animal on it. Versus
Versus has that sheep, yeah, that
that
lamb or whatever.
song. I did that. I did that in a cover band. So like, I'm getting all these flashbacks of these grunge songs. But I liked the Pearl Jam, and I liked doing the Alice in Chains and everything. You know. Then there's one band we kind of forgot about. Stone Temple Pilots. They get
Stone
thrown,
Temple Pilots,
but they're different. They're not from Washington. They're from California.
right?
So how does a California band become, so popular in the Seattle scene? In that first album, what, Plush or whatever it's called,
Yeah,
great sex type thing. They were definitely hard
1992.
hard rock.
Oh,
Uh,
for sure. And it's no secret that the singer will end up collaborating with Slash on that project, Velvet Revolver,
oh, that's a,
right?
yeah, about that
So
that album, yeah,
so going to your point, absolutely 100%. And
yeah.
one of their best albums, 1994, Purple, which
Oh,
ha
bad scene,
which amazing. And again, I feel like as though that the lead singer noticed the grunge sounds and sort of like applied it, embraced it,
yeah,
and even
yeah. Eddie
he's a
Vedder,
great singer. Like
it really
he's
is,
so stylish. He
yeah.
knows how to sing different ranges, but he definitely channeled his like inner Eddie Vedder
He
and
did,
kind of like get that guttural,
yep,
they'll later be mocked.
yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned great bands. Now back to we square one,
Yeah.
Nirvana, which usually leads the big four if they came out in a parade.
Yep.
So they had released in '89 Bleach, right?
Right.
Few
Really
years pass.
liked Holly.
Yep.
That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, great music on that. About a Girl, I think is probably
Yeah.
the famous song on that. But then in 1991 they released Nevermind, and this was a cultural landmark. It
Yeah.
it changed the sound of rock music in
Oh,
America.
oh, totally. You know what it did. Literally overnight. I remember watching the debut of Teen Spirit and going, "Oh my God! Like, what is this? What is this band?" And then you got people like Kirk Hammett, Metallica, saying that's his favorite new band, and everyone. So a lot of people endorsed them, kind of like what we're going through now, the presidents and all that stuff. They were, endorsed by a lot of metal bands, where a lot of other metal bands hated that. They're like, "Oh no," because they knew it was coming. They knew their careers
Right.
were going to go shitter in America, and let's face it, that's where the money was in America. So
Right. And speak no, it's funny. And going just connecting the dots with like the new wave British heavy metal, we had a band that we mentioned, Def Leppard,
yeah,
that by I think it was '87, they released Hysteria, like they were
yep,
massive. They wanted to make it in America.
yeah.
No, but they are the example of a band that died out because of Nirvana. And they
Oh,
tried to match the sound, but it just didn't work,
on
right? So a
it,
lot of bands fell.
Def Leppard. They're after Hysteria. They couldn't put anything good out.
No.
A lot of metal bands. Motley Crue had Doctor Feelgood. I'm not a fan of that album.
No, but
You
geez,
know,
Dr. Feelgood, was that '89 or '87?
it was '89. That was like
Okay, if anything, you know what, Dr. Feelgood, I feel as though it closed out the heavy metal, hair metal scene in LA,
that's a great.
um,
It's a different.
produced by Bob Rock,
Yeah, Bob Rock.
the infamous Bob Rock.
Bob Rock took a lot of bands' careers and made them a lot of money, and he changed their sound. Metallica, especially, in their
Well,
image and their look, and
well, I was gonna say Metallica, Black Album, '90s, and it's funny, that's just Gil probably get mad at us, but or me. The Black Album is probably the last thing Metallica does that reaches wide influence. Not to say that they had record sales, but the
yeah,
problem is Metallica's output got kind of spotty,
it
right?
did.
It
It
wasn't good anymore. And the moment they cut their hairs, they
they
sort of embrace that street Seattle style too.
Yeah, they
Just
got
didn't
pierced
work anymore.
stuff, and like there's a video of Alice in Chains holding up signs like why'd you guys cut your hair,
That's
stuff.
right. That's
Oh,
right. No, dude, I think that was written
and
on.
band saying that to a metal band, you know what I mean? Like
Oh
so,
man.
you know, and then you know, and then there was some. Then once In Utero came out, and Cobain dies. Would you say that's the end of grunge? Like the lifespan of grunge in the '90s was not that long. It was a
Uh,
short. No, it was
uh,
like the wave of British.
Cheech, I like that. Yeah. So, and again, this is just our opinions. Comment below if you disagree with us or you think you have a timeline for when grunge started and when grunge ended. But with the suicide of Kurt Cobain, that's when grunge was then kind of, in my opinion, took sort of like a slow, steep decline.
And you could say the same thing. A lot of people, a lot of older people I talk to say when the crash of Skinner, Southern Rock died that day. A lot of older people that I know that grew up on Southern Rock said when Skinner's plane crashed, Southern Rock died that day. I kind of disagree with that, but that's from another episode. But I think with grunge, In Utero came out, he kills himself. Then there's a period where what's going on? There's a Smashing Pumpkins is getting hot. The Chili Peppers are getting hot. Alternative and grunge
Yep,
start to have
yep.
they start to intertwine, and then bands like Korn start to emerge. The
Well,
Deftones.
well, before we go there, just one more thing about the death of
Yeah,
Kurt Cobain. So Lane Staley,
yeah, he died too. Yeah, that
he
right.
also, because of drugs, he ended up dying as well.
What year
That
was
was in,
it? Was a few years later.
so a few years later, I could. It's Cheech, right? Is Lane
Lane Staley.
Staley. And Soundgarden will end up changing their sound a little bit after Super Unknown. Alice, and then just going back to Pearl Jam, they'll end up. Oh, he actually died in 2002.
Oh, Lane Staley. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so they.
Uh,
I wonder. I mean, I lost track after Cobain
well,
died.
Cheech, what ended up happening with Alice in Chains after what became their last massive album, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah,
They did a famous MTV Unplugged performance. They released some like an EP or whatever, but it was more
yeah.
acoustic. They
Hmm.
really embraced more of an acoustic sound. But they fizzled out a little bit. They
Yeah.
kind of broke up.
It all
And
started out, and Stone Temple Pilots kept going for a little while.
they
They,
kept going, but Cheech, I think Purple was their last big album.
yeah,
I think, and it just going back to Pearl Jam. 10 was so successful, but it turned off Eddie Vedder. So Eddie Vedder sort of took Pearl Jam, they to become like anti-commercial a little bit. But it's
yeah,
funny, the more anti-commercial he became, the more popular Pearl Jam was. So,
exactly.
but he kind of was started to peel away that grunge sound. He was like, no, 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 no.
Yeah,
Like he didn't want to be uh, identified as like, a grunge band anymore. So
yeah.
that's what was happening. So the big four started to, you know, fizzle out.
After
And
three albums, that's it. And what is Nirvana? Three albums: Bleach, Nevermind, and Utero, and
that's
then
it.
it's over. It's over by '95. Um, there were some other good bands I liked. Smashing Pumpkins. There's a band called Babes in Toyland from that era. But then check this out. After Korn and the Deftones were around, and the Chili Peppers, they're all different sounding. Green Day, rock rock comes back for a short period. Bands like Buck Cherry,
Yeah. Yeah.
Urge. Bands like what do you call it?
Cheech, do you remember The Darkness from
Oh,
England?
they were
Remember
great.
him?
Yeah. And then Creed, a band called Creed
Yeah.
showed.
Yeah.
So
And Nickelback.
Nickelback. So rock is kind of emerging. It's coming back. And there was one other one I was thinking Buck Cherry, Creed, Godsmack.
That's right.
Godsmack was bringing like metal back. So that's around 98, 99, 2000. So I was excited. I'm like, oh shit, it's coming back. But then out of nowhere comes like Limp Bizkit. And it's like, oh no, what
Oh,
the?
wait. Now, okay, so Limp Bizkit is funny because then you had this genre called new metal, which Korn was already starting to
Yeah.
do, right? And it's a blend, right? It's like rap.
Of course.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
metal. I argue with rap, turntables. They added some probably sampling and
Yeah.
sounds there too. But Limp Bizkit became huge
Yeah.
to a lot of people's dismay.
And then
Um,
the whole everything started to change from there. And I don't know where like music went after that, after
yeah.
like
Do you remember Linkin Park? They were part of that too.
Lincoln Park was good. The rap metal. That's right. Rap, but they were better than Limp Bizkit, I think, because they
Oh,
had
for sure.
meaningful lyrics. They even did something with Jay-Z, I think.
And in the 2000s, yeah,
Yeah,
because it's funny, they became sort of like a classic rock act later on,
yeah, yeah.
and they kind of refined their sound a little bit. But yeah, they collaborated with Jay-Z,
Oh,
which was they did some noteworthy collabs, soundtrack one of the Transformers movies, I think, or whatever. But it's later in the
yeah.
2000s. But yeah, so new metal, Limp Bizkit, but quickly collapses.
Oh,
Like
yeah. By 2005, there's not much. There's bands out there, and they play them at the Temple a lot. You'll hear some of these bands from that era. Oh, the Foo Fighters. They kept it
Foo
going.
Fighters after Nirvana, yeah.
Yeah, that
And
was a
it's no, and it's funny because
car.
there was also you mentioned already one band. You mentioned bands like Green Day. There was also Blink 182. So
Oh, I
these
forgot.
are kind of like new punks. They're not
Yeah,
punks per se, but they return things very simple
yeah,
guitar riffs,
yeah. Blink
great players.
really good. Yeah. So like you got that was probably late '90s Blink
Yeah.
182, and they went on to have go well into the 2000s.
Oh
With
yeah.
hits and stuff like that. So I just say like Blink 182. It all goes back to grunge. It goes back to Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all that. If Green Days, like Dookie came out what, 92?
I
And then,
think some, oh, 94,
or was it later? Was it later?
something later. Yeah, yeah.
That's a great album, so that post-punk stuff. So the grunge and alternative brought so many great bands, but back, I don't know where Mrs. Doubtfire is, but back to why.
So we have less than a minute. So I kind of lost track of Mrs. Doubtfire over here. And so we'll
So
just
never,
continue the next part though, but just
so
final
never,
thoughts.
never mind. We should talk. Let's talk about never mind, maybe in the next one. Like, what's the big deal? Like, really, what's the big deal? You
Yeah.
know, don't
Yeah.
hate us, on the fans, but
No, no. And just a reminder, we love Nirvana. We love Nevermind.
oh yeah, yeah.
Is it the greatest thing ever? I don't know about that,
You
but
put it up, Beatles. No,
oh gosh, every time they do that, man, I'm just like, I
yeah,
don't know about that.
I know. It's crazy.
One. Okay, so Cheech, so we left off. We'll end it with the big philosophical question:
Yes.
why Nirvana gets all the hype? Why Nirvana, Nevermind gets all the attention? It's Rolling Stone. Various critics will name it as
Yeah.
one of the greatest things of all time, one of the greatest rock albums of all time, one of the greatest things to come out of the '90s. Uh, but unfortunately, it shadows all the other great stuff like I would argue Pearl Jam's stuff,
Oh yeah.
Soundgarden, Alice
Alice
in
in
Chains
Chains.
in a way, and other great bands that you mentioned like Husker Du, who
Hmm.
were alternative, underground, and they kind of
Yeah.
had some success, but not
Well,
like Nirvana.
maybe Husker Du couldn't make it because metal was so big. Maybe it was the opposite in the 80s.
I agree because when they came out, think about it. You said it perfectly. If you were not listening to Motley Crue, Def Leppard, yeah, you're not cool.
And in my school, in my circle of things, like we all loved like the first two Crew albums, but it was like Slayer, Metallica, Iron Maiden, like
No, and
you
it's funny
the
with,
real
with
heavy band.
Metallica. No, and it's funny with Metallica because um their thrasher albums, they're metal. But when they released the Black Album, they blew up to the point that even chicks could dig Metallica because of Nothing Else Matters.
Yeah, only
And
only metal chicks. Like there was a handful of them in my school, like Metallica. But you're right. When the Black Album came out, and that's Bob Rock. That's what Bob Rock does. He's a great producer. He's a genius. You want to make millions? Let him produce your album. He did it with Motley Crue. Dr. Feelgood, I think, is the biggest selling album for them.
yep, yep.
Got him, huge. Uh, Bob Rock made Metallica what they are, even in the documentary. I'm not a fan of Bob Rock. I don't like to see bands get commercial. Someone like Steve Harris would probably say "fuck off" to Bob Rock. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to be that. Who wants to be that fucking much known as a sellout?
No,
And
but
that's what
you said yeah,
Metallica
but
did.
you said it perfectly. No, exactly. You said it perfectly. If you wanted to make the money, Bob Rock knew the recipe. Like he
But you had
sort
to
of,
you had to listen to him.
yep,
You had
yep,
to,
yep.
and like a lot of bands like a Maiden or imagine Rush. Bob Rock producing Rush. What he would do?
No,
He would destroy their sound.
no, no, and Cheech, you know what's funny? Um, in some of the documentaries I've seen in the making of the Black Album, you'll even see Metallica trashing on Bob Rock, sometimes not listening to him. Okay, Cheech. So I was just saying with the Black Album and Metallica, it's funny if you watch the documentaries of
yeah,
them making that album, you'll see Metallica like just trashing on Bob Rock, making fun of him, and Bob Rock dealing with them. But you're right,
yeah,
you had to listen to Bob Rock. There was no if you
yeah.
wanted to make
I
it.
mean, he's like a Mutt Lang. He's a genius. He knows how to get a genius depending on what you want. I mean, Mutt Lang is a fucking genius. Even for what Mutt Lang did for his wife, the country singer. Who was he married to?
She on a twin, right?
He made her like so popular. So Mutt Lang could do everything, but Bob Rock, a genius at making money for a band, or destroying a fucking band. I don't know. You know, I'm just gonna say it. But whatever.
But
Anyway,
go back to the question of Nirvana then. So
yeah,
why do what did Nirvana have that that made them, I would argue, like cultural icons, right?
maybe the look of Cobain.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah, that's a
the
good
way
place
he
to start.
looked. Because let's face it, the guy was he almost looked like a woman in a way. He had gotta be careful how I word things
No,
here,
no,
but
no. But dude, that is a
like
great
uh,
point.
he had blonde hair, he had blue eyes. Um, he had this ambiguous thing. Is that the word to use? Like an
Yeah,
ambiguous
yeah.
look.
Yeah.
Like he was like a. I mean, he wasn't like Robert Plant, like macho,
No, no.
feminine, but like at the same time macho, like a lot of those guys were. So he had. So I think he was really not like the um what's his name uh my brain is the guy in Soundgarden. He was a good looking guy too, but
Yeah,
I
Cornell.
guess Cornell, but I guess Cobain just had something that a uniqueness. That's the word. I'm not going to say these guys are good looking or that, but
No,
whatever.
no, for sure. No, no,
Uniqueness.
but no, for sure.
You know
But
what?
dude, you no, but
Never
you
mind.
tap into something because I will admit one of the first things that when I discovered Nirvana,
Yeah.
it wasn't because of their music per se. It was mostly the look of Cobain, because yeah,
Yes.
you're right. He had like this like blonde like raggly hair, right?
Yeah.
So kind of he wore kind of like grandpa clothing sometimes.
He did.
Like
Like
it's
I
kind of
said,
interesting,
the
right?
thrift store stuff.
Right. And he also was very I like how you mentioned like when you look at some of the 80s bands, their frontmen, a lot of them were macho, wearing leather, they got
But
some.
they look like girls, some of them. You know
Well,
what I
that's
mean?
the
Like,
irony. But that being
yeah,
said, not all of them. Like Def
yeah,
Leppard
yeah,
definitely, if
yeah,
you see the video for Pour Some Sugar on Me, like
yeah,
he's like wearing a tank top, like
yeah,
he's tough,
yeah.
you
They were
know.
posers. They were
Yeah.
posing, is what they were. The
No,
heavy metal guys.
I'm talking about Def Leppard,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
but there
But
were posers. There were
yeah, yeah,
posers. Um, and so and Guns N' Roses were kind of the middle ground where they were hard rock, hair metal.
Axel
Um,
was a badass. Axel was a lot like Cobain in a way, kind of a
in a way, in
badass.
a way.
You can compare them. Better singer, but but anyway,
But Cobain had this thing that I agree that look that I saw like I remember in the video for Smells Like Teen Spirit, he's wearing that sort of like iconic look that someone from his generation would wear, Converse jeans, that shirt with stripe with a white shirt under
oh,
it,
like the
or
Freddy Krueger shirt he had on, I think
something like
almost.
that.
Yeah,
Something like that.
he looked like
And,
the nerdy kid in high school, like the kid that would
uh,
be the nerd that like, wow, we're wearing Slayer shirts and Metallica shirts. You have a sweater on. The fuck is wrong with you? You know what I mean? But
yeah.
that's what I think it was. And then the thing about Cobain, I learned to respect him because one of my bass students was like, I know you don't like grunge, but here, read this book. It's Cobain's life. And dude, I was really blown away how sad of a life. I even
Yeah.
read in the book, he had a nervous breakdown on stage. And he had to be like,
Yeah.
he climbed up on the rafters and the police came. Like the guy was completely like he had. You can analyze him being, the
No.
psychologist. I don't know if he was bipolar or if he had issues, or I know he had
n-
family issues, and I know he slept. He slept like the guy slept like a cat, like 17 hours a day. Some crazy
Dude,
shit like that.
Cheech had drug issues, which stem from his personal
Yeah,
issues as well. I know at one
yeah,
point, I'm sure it was him, and also Lane Staley
yeah,
too.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
had drug problems, and so yeah. So the other interesting part about this kind of piece too, yeah, he had a mental illness, and I think, and
Mm.
this might be a controversial opinion, one of the reasons why, um, Nirvana, especially Kurt Cobain's lyrics, is
Yeah,
because I think he channeled a lot of that pain in his music, and
drugs.
I
Yeah,
I think I think he did it better than most of the grunge bands. That
yeah,
channeling of the pain.
yeah,
Um, and you mentioned a song in utero, "Rape Me," which is a
yeah,
harsh title.
yeah.
It and he repeatedly sings in that song "Rape Me," but it's sort of like a cry for help, right?
Well,
Um,
like every man, they meet a woman who usually fucks him up, and he met Courtney Love.
and that's another problem too.
And that like Sid Vicious met Nancy, John
Yeah,
Lennon met Yoko. So like you could go, it's historical. I'm not just saying this at a personal experience, it's historical. So it,
yeah,
it definitely played a part in. And then we could get into there's that whole theory she had him killed. I don't believe that.
yeah.
Somebody wrote about that, but
But go
I think
back to Nirvana. But I agree that look, I think with Nevermind, one of the things that we need to talk about is sort of like they were able to get all those sounds, alternative, prehistoric grunge,
yeah,
even some of the early grunge bands, and sort of synthesize it in one whole,
they did.
right? So they weren't really like they were not. Yes, they were innovators in a way, but they weren't really original because even Kurt Cobain will say, "I ripped off the Pixies." Like most of my
Oh
stuff is
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. And maybe Cobain might not have admitted this. Maybe Grohl would or Novoselic, but Husker do. Like I remember watching a rock critic on some show years ago. He's like, I fucking hate Nirvana. They just ripped off Husker Du, and I was like, holy shit, this guy's right. This guy, but they made their own sound. Like I don't want to.
right,
This is
right.
not to bash them. They're
Right.
great at what they did, but if I really think it was Cobain, the image, the look, having the two guys behind him. It was almost like he was a solo artist at one, you know what I mean?
Honestly, that's true because again, Dave Grohl and Chris
Solid.
Novoselic, they're amazing in their own right.
Yeah, yeah,
And we know Dave Grohl will end up fronting Foo Fighters, but
yeah,
I
great.
agree. If you watch the MTV Unplugged performance of Nirvana,
Yeah,
uh, dude, Nirvana, Kurt Cobain's front and center, and I think he's
yeah,
become sort of like the image and icon for a generation.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
A
Oh
lot
yeah,
of people.
I agree. I think it has a lot to do with Cobain. Is when you think of Nirvana, what's the first thing that pops in your head? Kurt Cobain.
The look of Kurt Cobain.
You know,
Yeah.
like
And I
when you
think
think of
and
the Beatles, you think of John and Paul.
yeah, yeah.
So the other two guys, oh yeah, yeah, they're great. George and who's the guy?
But
Ringo, yeah,
but
they're
it
good.
John
But
and Paul.
so it's that kind of thing, I think. And I think somebody from a record label jumped on that and said, "This guy's got the look. Let's just call him grunge."
Yeah,
No,
yeah. And if anything, it's funny because it could be argued he got all of his clothing from a thrift store, and yet that became the look that everybody wanted to copy.
it,
And it's funny because now I'm not sure for example like Eddie Vedder. I'm not sure if he took cues from like that his stylings, but I know Eddie Vedder. It's funny he also had a bad family history and kind of
yeah,
like
about him.
bad upbringing in a way. He channels that in the song Alive, right? But it's funny, he was a surfer, dude.
Really?
Yeah, so if anything, he was more of that Californian vibe,
Yeah, he's a mellow
there's so,
guy. He
he
seems.
is.
I've seen him in interviews, and then you could look at it like in the 80s, we all had denim jackets with Maiden killers on the back of it. In the middle of winter, we're not wearing flannel shirts to school. We're showing off our fucking Maiden t-shirts, our Sabbath t-shirts, you know. And now it's cool. It's July, and these guys have flannels and sweaters on. It's like, well, where's your Maiden t-shirt, man? Nope, I'm wearing that.
Yeah,
So
they popularized the flannel look. It's funny. It's just that whole look that Kurt Cobain became iconic for. Like
yeah,
he became the face, and I agree. I think that's one part. Um, and just from a music perspective, also, I think his name was Butch Vig.
yep.
Who
Vig with the V.
Vig, which talk about producers like Bob Rock and Mutt Lange.
Great
So,
producer. I mean, and he, how much money he made on Nevermind just to produce it. He got $1 million just to be the producer.
oh, Oh gosh. And it's
So
funny.
the record label must have been like, okay, we know this is going to be huge.
They
And
be new.
he was in a band. He was in
I think he was.
oh oh God, my brain doesn't work. They had a hot singer. She was beautiful.
He's Butch Vig, right?
Yeah, the girl singer was so fucking hot. I forget her. I forget the name of the band.
Garbage. Oh no,
Garbage.
no, 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 no. Let's see.
Yeah, it
Is it
was garbage.
garbage?
It was garbage. Yeah.
Yeah, it's garbage. And you know what's funny? He drummer and co-producer.
Yeah.
So
So,
and Butch Vig, it's really funny because in terms of his production, he also worked with Smashing Pumpkins
mhm.
and Sonic Youth.
Right.
And he has production credits on Smashing Pumpkins' Dream. So you're right. I think the record label knew what they were doing.
There's a
They
lot
knew
premeditation going on here.
there's a lot. So they're setting up the scene. And I love how you share that story with Warrant, how they got that 5 record deal. Because again, hair metal was still big
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
91. Nobody saw Nevermind coming except possibly the record producers and the sneaky, record earners who
This
saw, wait a
the
minute,
scheming,
there's a
the
sound here.
scheming demons. You know.
Scheming demons, right. They
Yeah.
saw it. They saw it and they saw something in Nirvana that
Yeah.
this is it. They're gonna be the next big thing. That
Yeah.
they're gonna cause a major shift in like rock music.
And let's focus on this guy, Cobain, and get Butch Vig in, who is a great produced album. Let's face it, from the drums,
Oh,
like forget
dude,
the
Cheech, they
music.
cleaned up their sound. No, so
Oh yeah,
thanks to Butch Vig.
Bleach is a garage band, pretty much when you think about
Yeah,
it. It's a
yeah.
different drummer. Imagine being that fucking guy. He must have fucking hated himself.
Oh gosh, getting replaced by Dave Grohl. Like if I was
Yeah.
gonna get replaced by Dave Grohl, I'll say to
Oh my
myself, you know what?
god,
I'm done. I can't compete with here.
it's
Um,
kind of Rush. He was like the John Rush.
yeah,
You know, you know.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
So and just really quick, so just going back to this idea of Nirvana, right? Again, we're not hating on Nirvana. I think we got to make that known
yeah,
set the record straight. But it's interesting how they def got to be the ones that define grunge, right? And
yeah,
became
and
that sound and toppled so many great bands that they weren't able to recover.
it was planned. It was totally planned by the record label, getting Butch Vig in and making Cobain the pretty boy, and
That's that's a great point. Yeah.
that's what did it. And they had the songs. The songs
Oh,
don't. So you can't say the songs sucked. It. The songs are good. I mean, I'm not gonna put them on now and listen to them like I would Iron Maiden or Sabbath or something, or Rush.
n no, it's funny because again, I'm not a musician. Kurt Cobain is a genius in his own right,
Yeah.
and I probably have no judge to judge him in his songwriting ability or anything.
Is he a genius? To go back to my cousin's question, when we talked about geniuses,
Well,
you know,
no,
genius.
you know what's funny? I don't call him a genius per se, but what I would call him is that he was able to he's one of those that through music was able to find an outlet for his pain, right?
Right, right, right.
I think that's what he did. Now he wasn't a genius, but in a way, he psychologically he was tortured. Like I love how you mentioned his biography. If
Yeah,
you know his life, and he
great.
had
He's
a
a
he had, he
great.
had a bad marriage with Courtney Love. It was
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah, yeah. She messed him up.
A lot of bad stuff, right?
Yeah,
And so, but just going back on that Kurt Cobain idea that um so it's funny. The more so for example, I've been binge listening to Rush, right? So
yeah,
a song like Hemispheres and even Pink Floyd and all the other great bands. After I discovered Nirvana, I discovered more music.
yeah,
And then I started to see the flaws in Smells Like Teen Spirit, which I thought it used to be. I thought it was the greatest song when I was young, but the
yeah.
more I grew old, the more I realized I can't listen to this. It's kind of silly. The lyrics are just like I don't know. Um, And even the sound gets a little bit tiring. I
Yeah.
thought it was timeless, but then I realized, like, off that album, and she, I don't know if you agree with this. And again, Nevermind, it is a great album
Yeah.
for like for rock music in the
Oh
90s.
no, no, it's definitely a very important album that needs to be talked about because of what it did.
Yep,
You know,
yep,
for what it did historically, you
yep.
know. And I much rather hear In Utero than that album. I think that's a way better
Oh
album.
yeah.
You
From
know,
your metalhead perspective, yeah.
it's heavy. It's a good point from that.
Oh, heavier. Sounds
But
almost industrial some parts, but
yeah,
um it's funny. I think this is my opinion. So just talking about like a little bit in the album, the best song, I got a couple. In Bloom
yeah,
and Lithium, which in
I
my
love it.
opinion, those are the masterpieces. And in terms of a little more aggression, Breed is amazing and
Mhm.
Territorial Pissings.
Ah, that's a good one. I forgot
So
about
kind of embracing that kind of like alternative Husker Du, Black
it.
Flag, you
It
know.
does, yeah. There's some, yeah. There is some good tracks on there, and you know, it's definitely equal to Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains. You know, as far as the goodness of it. But is it a Hemispheres? Is it Sergeant Pepper's? I mean, this
Oh,
is
okay, wait, pause right there. So, just from your opinion, they get compared a lot to the Beatles. Like, what do you think about that? I think it's nonsensical, but what do you
I
think about that?
can't compare any band to the you can't compare Led Zeppelin to the Beatles. The Beatles are the fucking Beatles. Like, even Led Zeppelin, when they were asked about like, are you influenced by the Beatles? Are you compared to the Beatles? And they're like, we want to get to the level of many people that the Beatles got to, but we can't be compared to the Beatles. Nobody could, because what the Beatles did, they changed music forever. You know, not too many band. I don't think any bands really did that.
No,
The
no. And
Beatles.
I'm a huge Beatles fan, and we're definitely gonna have some episodes on them.
Oh
So
yeah,
stay tuned,
yeah,
right? But I love how you mentioned Sergeant Pepper. So would we now? This is just also my another fellow personal opinion. People can disagree with me. I think an album. So I always see there's the greatest albums like Who's Next,
yeah.
Sergeant Pepper, Led Zeppelin 4. I think, and this is people probably hate me, but the only one that I think would go up there is Pearl Jam's 10 because only because of the songwriting.
Hmm.
If one listens to 10, dude, it sounds amazing. It
Oh,
sounds
and
fresh. It sounds timeless. Like just a song like Alive, right?
genius.
Dude,
That's
dude,
a genius song.
the guitar solo outro.
Yeah, those
Like,
guys were musicians. They were playing like classic rock guys. They were playing like Led Zeppelin. Jeff Ament can't stop talking about his fretless playing. The guy is amazing. I'd rather hear 10 than Nevermind any day. I'd rather hear 10 than Soundgarden or Pearl Alice in Chains. You know, Stone Temple Pilots would be my number two. I would put them
yeah,
on. I love them.
they're underrated.
They're the brothers. I forget their names, but those guys had a Zeppelin musical thing about
That's
them. The
good.
guy
That's a good
bass
way of
like
putting it.
Jones, a lot of chords like that Jimmy Page used. He even looked a little bit like Page, the guitar player. He likes
Yeah,
to drum
yeah.
like Page. So for me, I dug that. So yeah, Nevermind, I think was put together, to kind of like recap it by the label that needed to change this metal. Enough's enough, Valentine, Warrant, Skid Row, Every Month
Yeah.
Nightmare. Okay, we signed these guys for 2 albums. They got to go. Now we need this. What about this guy? They have an
No,
album, called Bleach. Let's put all our money into them and
right.
make him the big deal. And then look what happens. It ends a lot of careers for a lot of great bands and becomes one of the most important American, because heavy metal's not American. It's
No,
European.
no.
So I
A-
think grunge is probably the most American important movement. You know,
you know, it's funny, just adding one more thing that's The Godfather, Neil Young, in '92 releases his album Harvest Moon,
Great
which
album.
was sort of like a sequel to I think it was Harvest, 1971 or two's Harvest. And it's funny because Neil Young also prior to this, he releases Freedom, Rocking in the Free World.
Great
He
fucking.
returns with Crazy Horse too. He releases a string
I
of
don't. I
albums.
don't mean to cut you off. Did you ever see the video "Rocking in the Free World" with Pearl
Oh,
Jam?
oh no, that I haven't seen.
I'm pretty sure they do like an MTV awards thing. I think Neil Young sat in with them, and they did "Rocking in the Free World." I gotta find that video now. I'm pretty sure. I'm getting
Send
all
it
these
to me.
memories back from the '90s. Like these brain cells were, either I blocked them from for certain reasons. My life in the '90s. Um, but yeah. So I would definitely say Pearl Jam over Nirvana for me. Not
Same here.
not a diss to Nirvana. I think
No,
important band, but are they overrated? Please write in the comments how you feel.
we
And
want to hear from you. Do you
yeah,
think Nirvana's overrated? Do they deserve the hype? Are they the
yeah.
greatest thing since the Beatles?
And we're not hating. We're not hating on Nirvana at all because
No.
Territorial Pissings. I used to play that song. Like
Oh,
literally great song. I forgot about that one.
no, and it's funny because again, Nirvana is just it's just the for me it's crazy how they became the cultural center. You're right of American like culture rock. Um, it,
Yeah.
it's it's just crazy, and they defined MTV too because they were
Oh
constantly
yeah.
playing "Smells Like Teen Spirit."
Oh God. It was on. It was so Dean Spirit. I can't tell you how many times they played it. You're just like again with this song. Great bass intro. When the chorus, the verse is over the bass line before he
Hmm.
comes in. So to analyze that, I mean, it's a great song. I love it. I love the song. Love all their songs, just like I love Dr. Dre's Chronic. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So uh, it's not Hemispheres. It's not Revelations by Iron Maiden. It's not
Yeah,
Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. That's just my opinion. And I think it was premeditated by the music industry to
yeah.
music. And they make the Spice Girls during that era. They made Nirvana. You know what I mean? I
It's
mean,
it's a it's a good point.
my
Now, I
theory.
will say the only saving grace with Nirvana is that in a way they also gave other bands a chance for mainstream success. So like Smashing Pumpkins, Green Day. We forgot to mention there was one more in my head. Oh, Beck.
Oh yeah, back
Remember Beck? I don't remember him.
two
He
turntable
also
microphone. Love back.
yeah. Yeah, so Beck came on the
Very
scene.
yeah. Oh, and there's more. I just can't think of them. Like,
Red Hot Chili Peppers too.
well,
Like
the,
they
well, the
were
Chili Peppers were out already since '87. They were
yep,
they were out there, But then the alternative and the grunge just opened the floodgates for all these
open the
bands.
doors. Yep.
As '90s, as the '90s were going on, things started to change after Cobain died, like we said, and then it just went into like an oblivion. Like I don't know. There wasn't much after Limp Bizkit or who else?
No,
Corn. I can't even name
no.
any great. I mean, I loved Buck Cherry, like we said, Buck Cherry and uh who's the other band that we said? Creed. I loved Creed.
Creed, Velvet Revolver came out around that
It was
time.
late '90s, maybe a little later. I think two.
The song Slither.
Yeah, they were
Oh,
good. So you got the bands mixing up with each other, trying to do like super group kind of things.
yep, yep, yep.
you know. But so yeah, if there's anyone out there who wants to come on this show and tell us why we give us your points about why Nevermind should it is the biggest album and this is why it is, and I'm sure there's a I don't know 40-year-old out there going what are you crazy? These guys don't know what they're talking about, you know? So is it a generational thing? Like it killed my music. It killed metal for
Oh
me.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
I held it for years. I was like, well, fuck grunge, man. Fuck that shit. You know, it killed my
Well,
music.
dude, it changed the rock landscape, and in a way, it's sort of similar to, just going back a little bit to the '60s hippie revolution, where, for example, you had in 1950s, you had singers like Frank Sinatra, right? Who were
Hmm?
these popular, but rock and roll came in. 50s, you had before that Plane Crash with, remember, with Vichy Valens.
Big
Um, right. So, and in the 60s, you had the
Buddy
hippie
Holly.
revolution. Yep, Buddy Holly. Yep, 1950s and in 60s, you had the hippie revolution. The Bob Dylan revolution. Leaving behind folk rock, creating this cultural rock music.
Yeah.
Land shift.
It's gonna
So
change. It's a natural evolution of change. Like
yep,
metal,
yep,
I wish metal could have been met. I wish it could be the '80s now continued. You know, that's how much I love it.
yeah,
But it could
yeah,
never. And just like I wish John Bonham never died and Led Zeppelin would still be going. But '70s, '80s, that's an end of an era. '80s, '90s, end of an era. '90s, 2000, end of an era. It's just how life is, a cycle of
yeah.
musical life. And now the internet, to get back to that, there's no ending. It's never ending. It goes on and on and on and on. So you can't say from 2020 to 2030 it's an end of an era because there's no music that's a scene.
No, and that's no, and Cheech,
Am
I
I?
know certain somebody kind of had a hard time understanding you, and he's like saying, "What are you talking about? There are scenes." But the thing is now, right? And I guess I'll ask you this question.
Yeah,
Do you think we're due for another scene like the grunge scene? What do you
it'll
think?
never happen. It can't
No.
because grunge came out at the right time, and it goes back to three words: MTV.
Yeah. And
Because
that's ultimately the point.
MTV really controlled what we saw. Going back to Devontae's theory, brilliant theory. You know, you're force fed to watch MTV. That's what the music. Yeah, it was. But at the time, they played great music. I remember seeing Iron Maiden's Flight of Icarus for the first time. You know, on there, and my brains exploded. You know, seeing Rush exit stage left. I mean, Christ, seeing Madonna, you know, I like a virgin.
Yeah.
Like, wait, I gotta run to the bathroom. I'll be right back. You know what I mean? Like, so, like, like it was amazing. It was unbelievable what you got. And then grunge came out, and they just hit you like crazy with
Oh
all these
yeah. Oh
bands.
yeah.
So, MTV is the reason why these movements happened. You know, in the '60s they didn't have MTV. It just happened. You had the hippie
This
movement.
happened. Right.
You
Right.
know? In the '70s you had radio, going back to Spirit of the Radio. So everyone would listen to the radio. Oh my God, you know, let's listen to Carol Miller on WPLJ, or buy an album and smoke some weed and listen to, Dark Side of the Moon from start to finish.
Right.
And like the attention span was there. There's no attention span now. That's why there's no scene. You know, you can't.
No.
A
No.
band like Green Day came out. If they came out now, they wouldn't. They probably would have a hard time making it. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
greatest.
Yes. Aside from their old fans from
Okay, forget
90s and
what if Nirvana came out tomorrow and dropped Nevermind. What would happen? Would it be successful?
well, probably not.
No.
No. A- And and that's interesting because I also saw somewhere, so if you were to look, let's say on the Spotify top 10 or whatever,
Yeah.
dude, no rock bands.
No. Rock is
So
dead. Like the Who.
forget about it.
I remember my uncle, God rest his soul. You know, he turned me on to a lot of bands, and I was a little kid, and I went in the car with him. He was picking me up, and the Who song was on the radio. Rock is dead. You know that song?
Yeah, yeah.
Long live rock. You know. So he's like, listen. And this is when I was like on to rock. He's like, I hate to break it to you, but listen to this song. He was busting my balls. Rock is dead. Rock is dead. I'm like, no, no, rock isn't dead. Long live rock. And I was just like, I was like, 8 years old, crying. They wrote a song, "Rock is Dead," but it was in the irony, "Long live rock," and "Long live rock" is only in the past. And
Mm.
we would get disagree. Definitely, people would disagree. Certain people would disagree with us.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yes,
yeah.
but like, if
I
there's
mean,
anybody, please write in the comments about Nirvana. Give us points why Nevermind is should be up there with the Beatles.
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I want proof. You
yeah.
know,
And the only thing I will say is that it is a great album.
yeah.
Production wise, it's amazing. The Butch Vig managed to get raw Nirvana and make just the production is like
The guy's a genius.
amazing.
He's like their
Oh
Terry.
yeah.
He's the Terry Brown, of grunge.
No, and Cheech. So Butch, it's funny. When I was looking at the making of Nevermind, Butch was saying in one of the interviews is he advocated that Kurt Cobain multi-track his voice. Cobain didn't want that. He wanted raw, just
Yeah,
straight into the mic. But he was like, no, no, we have to multi-track, right? So big part of this recipe there, Butch Vig, for sure.
yeah. Fourth member, like any band. I mean,
Yeah.
Terry Brown brought the best out of Rush. You got to have a great producer. Martin Birch brought the
Uh,
best out of Maiden and Deep Purple.
but you know what's funny? That's the only Butch Vig the only time they worked with Butch Vig because when they convened for In Utero, they got someone completely different. They didn't want that Nevermind sound.
Yeah, which
Just FYI.
I don't blame them, because who wants to make part two? You want
Yeah, yeah.
want to move forward to a new sound, and In Utero is so different. And the bottom line is how we are at Mrs. Doubtfire.
So we are in this 6 minutes and 30
Okay,
seconds.
man, this is a fun one to talk about. I don't want to stop talking. It's like,
Dude, we could go on forever. And by the way, just on In Utero, right?
yeah.
So this is interesting. Nirvana, probably their last track. They released the song All Apologies.
Oh, that's
And
a good
it's
song. Yeah.
I have a personal theory. I could be totally wrong. But throughout the song, right, look what he says here. What else should I be? All apologies. What else could I say? He also says everyone is gay. What else could I write? I don't have the right. In my opinion, this is Kurt Cobain's apologizing. You know what? I sorry for this movement. I'm sorry. Like it's sort of like saying to the rock world, all apologies, and
Well,
it's
but
fun.
you know what? I'm remembering from the book, he hated fame.
Well, that's the thing
Yeah.
because he became the face of grunge, not by his own choosing. It
Yeah.
just happened. You said it, I think, in the best way possible. It was the right moment, it was the right time. And it's just funny how I always see the song as sort of like an apology on his behalf to the rock
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
because he's
And,
aware.
and Dave Grohl, I love the guy. It's so cool. Many years later, he made a heavy metal album because he felt bad. I see it in interviews. He's like, I feel bad that the band I was in destroyed people's careers. So he made an album he produced, and Motorhead was on it, and a bunch of metal guys, just to give a kickstart for metal again. That's
Right,
how
right.
cool Dave Grohl was. He felt bad about this.
It's funny you mentioned that because, as an aside, there's an alternative band called Queens of the
Stone.
Stone Age.
Yeah.
So they kind of also brought things a little bit back to like that hard rock sound, and he ends up playing, like you said, he ends up supporting a lot of these rock bands because he's
Yeah.
aware that grunge changed, the sound of music.
Yeah.
I think in a way, kind of forever, even though there was new metal.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, prog metal and like bands like Pantera who still kept the
Yeah.
metal sound. But
Oh
at
yeah.
that point, right, I think again, yeah, grunge did destroy a lot of careers. And
Definitely metal bands, and some bands are still recovering. Some bands are going out there playing to, like, 30 people, because, like, after their second album, their third album could have made them bigger, but it didn't. But not in Europe or South America.
ooh,
Metal, I don't know why the young kids there. This is what I don't understand. they get metal. I guess it's a cultural thing in
It must be
Europe,
cultural. It must
you
be
know,
cultural.
and definitely South America. Metal's alive and well there. I mean, thank God it's somewhere. You know,
Oh, Cheech, I was gonna say Van Halen didn't survive.
well, no, Van Halen kind of did because they,
90s?
yeah, they had a couple of huge hits in the '90s. Like
Really?
song right now, yeah,
Oh, wait a minute. That was released in the 90s, right?
'90s, yeah. Van
And
Halen,
AC/DC, Thunderstruck,
yep, early '90s, but
early 90s.
that's for grunge. That's like '90.
Ooh, okay.
You know, then Van Halen shot themselves in the foot when they got Gary Sharon to be their singer.
Yeah,
After
right.
Amy left, it was like, no, this ain't cutting it. And then they were gone for a while. So a lot of but Van Halen, I was thinking about that. Van Halen did sneak through it with Right Now, it was a huge hit. Um, very few bands from the '70s, or '80s, like Van Halen, they didn't really last through grunge. Neil Young did, of course, because he got respected
Right.
being the father of grunge.
And
But yeah,
I feel like Neil Young is like Rush. Like it's something about Canadians making, you know,
yeah.
smart decisions. They don't care. They're like, you know what?
No, he's actually playing the Capitol Theater in Portchester.
Oh, he's set to play there?
Yeah, but if ticket prices are like all off the
Oh
charts.
gosh. When did you
Like
see that?
Silkman was telling me, Joe was telling me,
Ooh, I want to see how much tickets are.
they're like
I saw him at the Barclays years ago.
like $500, something like he had to be super
I bet.
legend these days.
Oh, I bet.
But I don't know. Anyway, so on the note, because I know Doubtfire's creeping up.
1 minute and 40 seconds. So I guess final thoughts.
So Nevermind to me is a great album. I like Nirvana, but it, I rather hear Pearl Jam than Nirvana in my choice. I wouldn't put them up with the Beatles. Anybody who wants to give us their points, give us the comments, contact us. We'll have you on the show. Would love to hear if somebody tell me why they think Nirvana, why Nevermind is, you know, the album, why it's up there with Sergeant Pepper's and all this other stuff. So, for you, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I share all those opinions you just shared. Again, Nevermind is a great album. In terms of rock music, it is very, very amazing, highly influential, and definitely a must listen. If you never listen, you can kind of hear
Oh,
this
listen to it,
the
but go
sounds of
back,
grunge.
do your homework, go
Go
back,
back,
go
go back.
listen to Husker Du, The Replacements, Green River, Mudhoney, Black Flag, go back to Iggy and the Stooges, MC5, but definitely go back to the '80s, because that's more, Black Flag and Mudhoney, Husker Du, which we should do a show about Husker Du. I can't stop talking about Bob Mould. It's my childhood, my secret childhood, my metalhead days. Listen to Husker Du on Sunday nights, man. Check out Bob Mould. I think he was in a band called Sugar too. The guy's a fucking genius.
But check out Husker Du.
Definitely Husker and the Goo